Welcome to the Dr. DC podcast. It's me, the doctor himself. Hello! And not across from me or beside me right now, producer Richard. This is our Halloween special. We do this every year. Normally, what it entails is reading a book. A spooky book for the end of Doctober. Happy Halloween! But this year, you guys picked a book. You had a selection of books, and you picked one, and Richard did not read it, and so we weren't able to record. And then he left the territory on another trip, and so I'm not the one. I have no intention of disappointing you all. I would never do that to you. I just want to make the record very clear about that. Our Golden Age patrons voted for DCeased content for Halloween. And so help me God, I'm going to give it to them. Although this little experiment, you may regret having called on me to do this. So, I'm going to do a thing. What can you do just by yourself? You're not just going to talk about a book you read. That's no good. Or maybe it is, but I decided not to do that. What I did is I just went to Google and I typed in the words DCeased fanfiction. So, context, of course. DCeased is a book, alternate universe one. It's basically a zombie story where the anti-life equation is released as a sort of techno-organic virus. They use Cyborg to distribute it, and basically people see it in a screen, and it turns them into these kind of zombies or whatever. It's about this plague going, and a bunch of heroes fall, a bunch of new ones rise up, and it's spawned some sort of fan favorite interpretations of characters, including Green Canary and all sorts of stuff like that. At any rate, this is fan fiction that is centered on Barbara Gordon, and then an original character named Kevin Beaumont, who is the child of Bruce Wayne and Andrea Beaumont, the Phantasm. So I found this fan fiction. I have no idea how long it is. I don't know how long I intend to keep this up. I have no idea how well it is written. I suspect it's not. I know nothing about it. I haven't read it at all. I've only read the summary, which just says... Sorry, I should give proper credit here. I'm going to be reading DCeased Borrowed Time. This is by Billy the Blue Beaver. I found this on fanfiction.net. And it's rated M. It's a horror drama story. Yeah, there are 3 reviews on it, which I have not read. Oh my God, it's 12,000 words. We're 100% not finishing this, but I'll read a bit of this. We might skip around. At any rate, the synopsis of this is, in DCeased, we saw what happened when DC's most popular heroes and villains dealt with a deadly virus that ended Earth, killing many heroes and villains alike. One of the many to fall and turn into the anti-living was Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl. In this storyline, we see what would happen if Barbara had not died and what she would have done in this apocalypse. This is her story. So, without further ado, DCeased Borrowed Time. So this is chapter 1 here. It's the prologue. So, Barbara Gordon had known Kevin Beaumont for 2 years. He was the son of Bruce Wayne and Andrea Beaumont, and was Damien's half-brother. From the moment she first met Kevin, this was a year after she'd gotten her legs back and got back to being Batgirl, Barbara instantly liked him. He was always nice to her, and she liked that he was willing to watch Supernatural with her. They even liked watching Steven Universe together. He was the right amount of quirky for her, and the right amount of nice. Plus, he was a very good cook. Barbara didn't realize it, but she developed romantic feelings for Kevin. The first year, it was just a crush. By the second year, she was in love with Kevin. She just wasn't sure how to tell him, or whether the young son of Bruce Wayne felt the same way about her. It was another Saturday in Gotham City. Kevin decided he wanted to go on vacation, specifically his old hometown, Bellevue, Washington. He hadn't seen his mother, and Kevin really wanted to spend time with her. Barbara helped Kevin pack up certain things to go to Bellevue. They were outside Wayne Manor, placing his traveling bags in the trunk and back seat of Kevin's car, which was a 1968 blue Roadrunner Plymouth. Thanks for helping me pack, Barbara, said Kevin as he smiled at her. No problem, Kevin, said Barbara as she smiled back at him. So how long will you be in Bellevue? Kevin shrugged and said, less than 2 weeks, give or take. I'll tell Dad about my progress and you'll find out. Barbara chuckled and said, you have fun on your vacation, you hear? Bruce, Alfred, Damien, and Ace, the family dog, came outside. Did you really think you could go without saying goodbye to us? Kevin's father, Bruce, teased. Wouldn't dream of it, said Kevin as he hugged his dad. I'll call you when I've made it to a motel. Gonna miss you, Dad. Bruce nodded and said, I'll miss you too, Kevin. You have fun with your mother. I love you, son. Kevin smiled and said, love you too, Dad. He gave Alfred a hug, and the butler said, safe travels, Master Kevin. Kevin nodded and said, I know you'll keep these guys in check. See you soon. Damien hugged his half-brother and said, the manor's going to be quiet without you, brother. Ace and I will miss you. Kevin hugged back and said, I'll miss you and Ace too, little bro. He then gave Ace a gentle pat on the head, rubbing it, making the dog happy. Be safe, okay? Barbara said, hugging Kevin. You too, Babs, he replied Kevin as he hugged back. He got in his car, waved goodbye, and drove off, leaving Wayne Manor. Little did Barbara know was that this would be the last time she would see Kevin alive. Chapter 2, Scared Shitless in Bellevue. I just gotta say, before we get into chapter 2, I'm not trying to be mean. Sometimes just the way a sentence is constructed just strikes me as funny. Obviously I think it's funny without having known it. There was a supernatural reference in there. I really enjoyed that. So I am going to be laughing through this. That's not me taking the piss, but sometimes the phrasing of things, especially as I'm reading it cold, is just going to make me laugh. So, Chapter 2, Scared Shitless in Bellevue. It had been a few days since Kevin left Gotham to go on his vacation at Bellevue. He enjoyed spending time with his mother, Andrea. It was quiet and relaxing. Little did Kevin and Andrea know that this was a calm before the storm, for a deadly virus was about to destroy the world. On one particular day, Kevin was using the bathroom to do his business. He'd left his cell phone on the couch in the living room. He was washing his hands when suddenly Kevin heard his mother let out a blood-curdling scream outside. It sounded like bloody murder. This startled and alarmed Kevin. His hands were soaked as he rushed out of the bathroom and asked Mom, what's wrong? He gave a look of concern. What he did not know was that on Apocalypse, Darkseid had corrupted the anti-life equation and infected the new god. This corrupted anti-life equation became a virus that latched onto Cyborg like a parasite. He was teleported to Earth, and the corrupted anti-life virus turned into a techno-organic virus that latched onto the internet, on every piece of technology that contained the internet. It started with Metropolis and spread onto Gotham. The anti-life virus infected 600 million people, turning them into undead slaves to the corrupted equation. They were known as the anti-living. The anti-life virus was only beginning to spread, and it spread all over America, and Bellevue, Washington was one of many to fall under this zombie-like infection. The anti-life virus had spread onto Kevin's cell phone, and Andrea made the mistake of looking into Kevin's smartphone. Once she looked at the corrupted anti-life equation, the damage had already been done. The virus got into her head, killing her instantly, her blood-curdling scream a death scream. Andrea Beaumont was no more. She was now a slave to the corrupted anti-life virus. The anti-living husk looked at Kevin and hissed at him. Mom? Kevin asked, starting to get scared, because Andrea's sky-blue eyes were now lifeless and pale. Her face was bloody from her vain attempt to tear the corrupted equation from her head. She then attacked Kevin with the intent of infecting him, her arms thrashing at him wildly. Mom, what's happened to you? Kevin asked as he dodged the undead monster's attacks. Mom, I don't want to fight you. Please stop. But Kevin's pleas fell on deaf ears. The undead slave then bit Kevin on the left wrist. Kevin then pushed the monster away, mostly in self-defense. Kevin got out of the house and into his car. As he started the car, Kevin looked at the wound and thought, I don't know why Mom just attacked me and bit me, but this bite broke the skin. I better get to a hospital. Kevin then started to drive. What he didn't know was that the adrenaline caused by being scared shitless was merely delaying the infection. Soon, it took its toll on Kevin. At first, Kevin thought it was just a splitting headache, but soon the pain worsened. Ah, what's happening to me? Kevin groaned in pain. Something's in my head. God, make it stop. Nyarg! Kevin gripped his head and scratched his forehead while screaming in pain, trying in vain to tear this infection out of his head. This caused him to crash the car. Kevin Beaumont was no more. The undead, anti-living husk that once was Kevin Beaumont crawled out of the wrecked car, ready to spread the infection. Chapter 3. The Monster Inside of Us All. Hours before the anti-life virus broke out, Dinah Lance, Black Canary, had invited Barbara over to camp with her, Oliver, Green Arrow, and Hal, Green Lantern. Dinah was one of Barbara's good friends, and she figured it'd be nice to leave Gotham for a while and relax. It was just the four of them in the woods outside Metropolis. Barbara, in her civilian camping clothes, walked on over to the lake. She took off her hiking shoes and socks, and dipped her bare feet in the water, happily relaxing. Suddenly, someone tapped her from behind. I'm so immature. I'm so sorry. Barbara turned around and saw it was her best friend, Dinah. Got room for one more? Dinah asked as she rolled up her khakis, untying her brown boots. Sure, I wouldn't mind some company, said Barbara as she smiled and nodded. Once Dinah's boots were off, she dipped her bare feet in the lake next to Barbara. That's better, said Dinah. The two friends waded in the water, enjoying each other's company. Thanks for inviting me on this camping trip, Dinah, said Barbara. I needed this to get away from it all. Crime fighting, being Batgirl, especially from technology. I'm honestly glad I left my cell phone. It's a nice change of pace. Dinah nodded and said, No problem, Babs. Heroes like us deserve a break now and then. Barbara noticed a little fish trying to nibble her toe, causing her to giggle. She sighed happily. Something else on your mind? Dinah asked. Barbara blushed and said, Okay, you promise not to tell anyone? This conversation will not leave this camping area, promised Dinah. All right, there's this guy I have a crush on, explained Barbara. Who's the guy? Dinah asked curiously. Well, he's Bruce's son, replied Barbara. Damien? Dinah asked, surprised. Oh, no, not him, assured Barbara. He's Damien's half-brother, Kevin. Oh, the Beaumont kid, Dinah said in realization, earning a nod from Barbara. He's certainly handsome, commented Dinah. He's also such a sweetheart, said Barbara. I've been debating with myself whether I have feelings for him, and I love him. Dinah then asked, Have you told him you love him? Barbara shook her head and said, No, not yet. He's on vacation with his mom right now. I haven't told him how I feel about him. I'm not even sure he feels too same way about me. Dinah looked at her and said, Hun, you can only find out what he feels about you if you tell him your feelings. Barbara nodded and said, You're right, Dinah. I plan on telling Kevin I love him when he gets back from his vacation. Dinah nodded and said, Sounds like a plan. I'm sorry. Something about I plan on telling him, and then sounds like a plan. That really got me. Much later, Barbara, Dinah, Oliver, and Hal were roasting marshmallows by the campfire. I hate camping, Hal griped. I don't know why I let you two talk me into this. This caused Barbara to chuckle. Because I'm very persuasive, said Dinah. She persuaded me, vouched Barbara in a joking manner. And you're weak-willed, Hal, Oliver joked with a smirk. I'm literally known intergalactically for my strength of will, defended Hal. And yet, look at you camping, teased Oliver. Clearly, I'm going to have to update the entire universe on your utter capitulation here, Dinah said. Oh, Dinah said that? Oh, no. Okay, sorry. Hang on. And look at you camping, teased Oliver. Clearly, I'm going to have to update the entire universe on your utter capitulation here. Dinah said, Hal, we saved the world from the forces of apocalypse. We've earned one night away from it all. Barbara nodded and said, Yeah, I certainly have. Why don't you use your ring to rustle up a ukulele and we can sing some campfire songs, Oliver asked. Isn't there a chance that Dinah could blow up our heads if she sings, Hal asked. And doesn't Barbara sing like a dying cat? Barbara laughed. I do not sound like a dying cat when I sing. Kevin says I sing like Ariel. Hal rolled his eyes and sarcastically said, Sure you do. Suddenly, Oliver stood up. "What are you doing, Ollie?" Hal asked incredulously. "I'm standing for the presentation," replied Oliver. "What presentation?" Hal asked in reply. Oliver did a mocking salute and said, "Hal Jordan, you have the ability to suck the joy out of any situation. Welcome to the Killjoy Corps." Barbara keeled over laughing. Hal stood up and said, "Yeah, I'm going to turn in." He then walked to his tent, and the three friends could hear him on his cell phone. "Unbelievable," Barbara said, rolling her eyes. "So much for getting away from it all," said Oliver. "Ready?" Oliver then used his arrow to make a melody as Dinah started to sing "I Will Always Love You." What does that mean? What does that mean? Suddenly, Hal let out a death scream, startling the three friends. "Seems like an overreaction," said Oliver. "Hal?" Dinah asked in concern. Suddenly, the tent exploded green, throwing the three back. "Hal?" Oliver asked. "Oh my God," Dinah said in concern. "I've got a bad feeling about this," said Barbara. She was right to be concerned. Hal was now part of the anti-living. The zombified Green Lantern lashed out at Oliver, Dinah, and Barbara with his ring, a green spike scratching Dinah in the back. Oliver then released a boxing glove arrow to punch the zombie in the face. Barbara pulled out a batarang and threw it at Hal in defense. Suddenly, a giant green pair of jaws from the ring came in to lethally attack Oliver. Dinah thought fast and let out her canary cry to stop the husk that was once Hal Jordan. The canary cry then killed Hal. "Oh my God, he's dead," said Barbara, as she noticed he wasn't breathing or moving. He was going to kill you, and Ollie, Dinah said, still in disbelief at what she'd done. Suddenly, Hal's Green Lantern ring started floating and said, "Green Lantern of Sector 2814 deceased. Scanning for replacement. Scanning for replacement found. Dinah Lance of Earth, you have the ability to overcome great fear. Welcome to the Green Lantern Corps." The ring then put on Dinah's finger, turning her into the new Green Lantern of Sector 2814. "Whoa," was all Oliver could say. "You're a Green Lantern," Barbara said in amazement. "No, I don't want this," Dinah said in reluctance. "Take it, we're going to need it," said Superman as he suddenly flew in. Dinah then picked up Barbara and Oliver and started flying while following Superman. They flew to the top of the Daily Planet. Waiting for them was Clark's wife Lois, his son Jonathan, and Damian. "Barbara, you're alive," Damian said in relief. Barbara and Damian hugged each other. "I'm glad you're alive too, Damian," said Barbara as she tousled his hair. "Bruce made contact," stated Lois as she activated the radio so that Batman could communicate with them. "Bats? Man, what's happening?" "Hal turned into a zombie and almost killed me, Dinah, and Barbara," said Oliver. "They're not They're not zombies," Batman corrected on the radio. "They're not consumed by hunger. They're not feeding. They're spreading death. They're stealing life. These are the anti-living, and the trigger is an equation." "I always knew math would do us all," said Oliver. I'm just taking a quick pause here. I don't know if some of these lines are lifted from DCeased, but I'm going to give credit here that, I like the way this Oliver is written. This Oliver is written very well. Anyway, back to it. "Listen carefully," Batman instructed on the radio. "I'm almost out of time. Being infected. I have examined my own blood." Barbara's heart sunk. "What do you mean, being infected?" she asked in fright. "I'm inside one of Mr. Freeze's suits," Batman explained on the radio. "Using the cold to slow down my metabolism, decelerating the speed of the virus within me, but it will soon take over." Barbara covered her mouth in horror. The man who was like a second father to her was going to die. "Bruce," Clark said sadly. "There's literally no time for sentiment, Clark," Bruce said on the radio. "It's a technological/biological hybrid. It can be transferred through blood and through digital imagery. To save the world, you're going to have to destroy any human carriers, and you're going to have to take down the internet." "I always suspected we'd have to destroy the internet to save the world. I just didn't know it would be like this," said Oliver. "But come on, you're practically too stubborn to die. Batman isn't going to be taken out by a virus. You're not going to get sick and fade away. You're going to sacrifice yourself to the galaxy, outwitting an evil as old as the stars or something." Dinah sighed and said, "Bruce, there must be something you can do." Batman said on the radio, "There isn't anything I can do. Or maybe my mind won't allow it. It wants this." Damian said in concern, "Batman?" He heard his father say on the radio, "Barbara, find Kevin and Andrea. You and Damian tell Kevin that he and Damian are the best sons I could ever ask for. Damian, Alfred has something for you. It's something I always wanted for you. Something I know you would have earned one day. I'm sorry I won't see you. I won't see you. Barbara knew Bruce at that point was long gone. Father? Damien desperately asked. Dad? Barbara could hear glass breaking and growling. Dad? Damien desperately pleaded. They then heard Alfred say on the radio, Computer, cease transmission. And that was the last they heard. Damien then broke down crying, and Barbara tearfully hugged him. That's the end of that chapter. I do want to say, again, I'm not, because some of the events of this are in DCeased, I can't remember whether or not some of this dialogue is, I mean, some of this dialogue is lifted from the comics, like the stuff about, Damien, like the batsuit is the gift that Damien has from Bruce. I have a sneaking suspicion that a bunch of the Green Arrow stuff is lifted from the comics because it reads really well, better than I would expect it to. Okay, where are we at here? How deep into this are we? Okay, all right, I can go a little bit more. This is chapter 4, Unkillable. Barbara and Damien spent the next half hour mourning the loss of Bruce. Bruce had been many things to Barbara. He was her mentor, hero, and father figure. She was like a daughter to him, and now he was gone. But Barbara knew that if Bruce was here, he'd tell them to grieve later and continue fighting. All right, I think I have a plan, began Barbara. What's the plan? Damien asked. I'm going to need to supply on weapons and a suit, said Barbara. I can't go back to my apartment. I think my technology has been affected with the virus already. And if I checked, I'm as good as dead. The Batcave has one of my old suits that probably still fits me. I'm going to suit up, find my father, see if he's still alive, and if he is, we're going to drive to Bellevue to find Andrea and your brother Damien. Hopefully they're alive. Need a lift to Wayne Manor? Dinah offered. Sure, said Barbara as she got ready to fly. Good luck, Barbara, and be safe. I wouldn't want to lose my big sister today, said Damien. You won't, promise Barbara. Dinah then carried Barbara and used her Green Lantern ring to fly out of Metropolis. A few minutes later, Dinah and Barbara landed outside Wayne Manor. By that point, Alfred had already left the house. Thanks for the lift, Dinah, said Barbara. No problem, hon, replied Dinah. If you need help, just holler, and Clark and I will be there. Barbara nodded and said, Godspeed to all of you. Dinah then flew away. Barbara watched to the secret passageway when suddenly she heard a noise. I can tell where you're hiding. Come on out, she said flatly. Suddenly she saw who was trying to get in. It was Jason Todd, the second Robin, and Red Hood. Jason? Barbara asked in relief. Jason took off his mask and said, Babs, you're alive. The two hugged each other. What are you doing here? Jason asked. Here to get supplies. What about you? Barbara asked in relief. The two walked to the cave as Jason explained, hoping to see if anyone's all right. Before Barbara could explain to Jason what happened, they saw a pool of blood. Below them were the lifeless bodies of Bruce still in his bat suit, Tim Drake in his Red Robin suit, and Dick in his Nightwing suit. It was as bad as Barbara had feared. Oh no, Jason said. Barbara wrapped her arm around Jason's shoulder to comfort him. He looked down and silently said, I thought, you of all people. Suddenly they could hear growling in the cave. Jason pulled out his gun to see who was growling. It turned out to be a dog, not just any dog. Ace? Jason asked. He and Barbara squatted down to let Ace walk to them. Ace sniffed them, then licked Barbara's face. Jason and Barbara petted him. I know, boy, said Barbara. Don't worry. We're not going to leave them like this. It's okay, promised Jason. Want me to help you bury them? Barbara offered. Sure, said Jason. Barbara and Jason then walked to the basement inside Wayne Manor, where there were some planks and shovels. Planks and shovels. Once Barbara and Jason collected those, they went back to the cave. Barbara and Jason dug up 3 holes for Bruce, Dick, and Tim. Once that was done, they carefully placed the bodies into the holes and buried them. They then scribbled their names on the planks as graves. I never thought it would end this way, said Barbara. Not for us or for Dick. Anyone else alive? Jason asked. I think Alfred left to find Damien. Damien's alive and in Metropolis with the Kent family, last I checked, confirmed Barbara, as she went to look for one of her old bat suits. She found her old black and yellow costume from a few years ago. She noticed that Bruce had sewn the bullet holes from years ago. This'll do, said Barbara as she got the suit out of its display. She looked at Jason and asked, "Do you mind not looking?" Jason covered his eyes, turned around to respect Barbara's privacy, and Barbara changed into her black and yellow Batgirl costume. Jason asked, "What's your MO, Babs?" Barbara got the top and bottom part of her suit on. It's all of it. It explained. "My plan is to find Dad, see if he's alive, save him, and then drive to Bellevue to get Kevin and Andrea." She then got her yellow boots on. "The drive from Gotham to Bellevue will take less than 2 days," stated Jason. "For all we know, the virus might have spread to Bellevue already." Barbara, what if... Sorry, I need to take a break here. 2 days? Even if you drove nonstop, is it possible to drive from New Jersey, where Gotham is, to Washington State in 2 days? That's a legitimate question. I would think even if you were driving nonstop 24 hours, you couldn't do that in 2 days. I can't believe that's the bit that's making me pause. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I want to skip ahead a little bit because I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's pretty extensive. But I'd like to skip ahead. I'm going to read out the chapter names here. A, for fun, and B, hopefully one of those things will inspire me to read a particular chapter. So, the upcoming chapters. Chapter 5, The Road to Bellevue. Chapter 6, Mercy Kill. Chapter 7, Christian Burial. Chapter 8, The Benefit of Hindsight. Chapter 9, To the Past. Chapter 10, Fate of the Universe. Chapter 11, Cyborg's Final Destination. Chapter 12, Posthumous Message. Chapter 13, Reunion. Chapter 14, New Future. Chapter 15, Epilogue. I think I would like to jump from here to Chapter 6, because I don't know that I need the road to Bellevue, but I imagine Chapter 6 is putting down Kevin, so let's skip to that. Alright. After 43 hours of driving, Barbara and Jim, made it to Bellevue, Washington. Barbara was driving while Jim was in the passenger seat. He'd woken up 2 hours ago. "Well, here we are," said Barbara as she observed the city in a park. Kevin had often told her of his old childhood hometown. The city was clean and vibrant. The name Bellevue was French for the words beautiful view. Yeah. Kevin said the city lived up to its namesake. He said it was a lot cleaner than Gotham City. Barbara even wanted to visit the half-price bookstore that Kevin recommended. Barbara knew Kevin loved the place he grew up in because he spoke so highly of it. Unfortunately, Bellevue had seen better days. The once vibrant city was now a barren wasteland. Various stores, malls, restaurants, schools, and popular tourist attractions were destroyed and or overrun by the undead. It was as bad as the outbreak in Metropolis and Gotham. "Well, to say this city looks like crap is an understatement," said Jim as he looked at the barren landscape in dismay. Barbara saw a random citizen running. He was on fire. "I really do hope Kevin and his mom are safe," she said, worried. She then drove to the address of Andrea Beaumont's house. Kevin had stated that this was where Andrea lived when she first moved there. Barbara then parked the car, breathing in and breathing out. "You ready?" Jim asked, loading up his gun and putting it in its holster. "As I'll ever be," said Barbara, as she reached into the duffel bag to find any weapon. She found a loaded .45 caliber gun with a holster. Barbara wasn't fond of guns, not after what Joker had done to her years ago. Just seeing someone fire a gun in front of her was enough to raise Barbara's anxiety levels and make her have flashback attacks of that fateful day. But now, just gotta say, that must make crime fighting tough. But now, things were different. Now in this world where 600 million people and rising, including her friends and family, were infected with a deadly virus, it was either kill or be killed. The likelihood of a cure or an immunity vaccine very low. Barbara had to, people would even take the vaccine, am I right? Barbara had to get used to that for the time being. She wrapped the holster belt around her waist and put the gun in the holster. She then put her mask back on. You go look for that boy and his mother. I'll cover you, said Jim. I'll count to 3, and once we get to 3, we get out of the car. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Jim and Batgirl then got out of the car, and Jim had his gun raised, looking around for any anti-living carriers. Batgirl then opened the door of Andrea's house and went in. Batgirl then called out, Miss Beaumont? Kevin? Are you here? Are you all right? But then the anti-living husk that was once Andrea Beaumont came out. Her skin now looked sallow and nearly almost whitish-yellowish. She looked like a corpse that had been dead for 2 days and hadn't been embalmed. There was... Sorry. Sorry. I love the idea of using a simile, but it's the thing you use in the simile is just the literal description of what she is. She looked like a corpse that had been dead for 2 days. It's been 43 hours, so it has been 2 days. She is a corpse and hadn't been embalmed. Also true. Like a simile is supposed to be she looked like and then something else that gives you the image, but that's just literally what she is. I don't know why that's so funny to me. Oh, I really like that. Oh boy. There was blood on her teeth, and she hissed at Barbara. Barbara gasped in horror. The undead woman outstretched her arms and made a loud, incomprehensible noise, an unholy growl, something like "Hurr!" That's bad reading on my part. She lunged at Batgirl, ready to infect her. Bang! But then she was stopped by a bullet to the head, laying on the floor. It was Jim who shot her, of course. Are you okay, Barb? Jim asked. He shot the corpse again to ensure she'd stay dead. I'm not bitten, if that's what you're wondering, Batgirl replied, fastly breathing in and out. She looked sadly at Andrea. Suddenly they heard another unholy growl, this time behind Jim. They turned around and saw who it was, much to Barbara's horror. It was Kevin, now an undead monster. His once dark blue eyes that shined with kindness, love, and compassion were now replaced with something dull, cold, and lifeless. His skin was just as decaying as Andrea's skin was, even if it was the first stages of body decay. He had a bite mark on his left wrist, and his teeth were a blood red, clearly from biting and infecting other people. Kevin's humanity was long gone. It hissed, ready to lunge at the bodies with life, wanting to spread death. Barbara's heart broke in two. No, not you too, Kevin, Barbara said tearfully, backing away. She was too late to save him. Barbara looked at her father and said, Let me do it, Daddy. Jim let his gun down, sadly nodding. He understood. She's going to old yeller Kevin. Oh, God. Barbara took off her mask, then took her gun out of her holster. Fresh tears streamed out of her eyes as she aimed her gun at the undead monster. I'm so sorry, Kevin, Barbara said sadly. And then she reluctantly pulled the trigger and shot Kevin in the head, instantly killing him. Bang! Kevin fell to the floor, instantly dead. She shot him a second time in the head to ensure Kevin would stay dead. Barbara dropped her gun, walked to the dead body, and then fell on her knees. She then cradled Kevin's dead body and broke down crying. Jim walked to his crying daughter and hugged her in a comforting manner, saying, It's okay, Barbara. It's okay. Effective use of the double tap in this chapter. I'm going to jump ahead a few chapters here to chapter 10, Fate of the Universe, because that seems like the stakes are pretty high. Oh my God. Okay, God, I just got to start reading. Okay. For the next hour, Barbara explained that she was from the future. We've missed a bunch in the last 4 chapters. And how she and Cisco Ramon were capable of discovering time travel, and how Barbara was traveling through time, despite the fact that the time travel was similar to X-Men Days of Future Past. I love a pop culture reference to explain the mechanics of things. Barbara then explained the future from which she was from, how and what caused it, what she had to endure, the destruction of Baltimore, Washington, and Metropolis, and so on and so forth. Victor was stumped and at a loss for words. He couldn't believe he was responsible for the deaths of more than 600 million people. Maybe millions more, probably billions. Finally, Victor asked, what happened afterwards? I don't know, replied Barbara. Since I traveled here via consciousness. Oh, I see what they mean by this future past. Right. Future Barbara is in current Barbara's body. Okay, gotcha. Since I traveled here via consciousness, I don't know what happened afterwards in my original timeline. But if nothing's done, this is what will happen. I just hope none of the others have turned or been killed while I'm doing this. I don't know what I'd do if Clark or Diana or Barry got infected. Cyborg looked down and said, damn, I never thought I'd be the cause of a zombie apocalypse. These aren't zombies, corrected Barbara. They don't crave or consume flesh. They're carriers of death, stealing life. They're triggered by the corrupted anti-life equation. Bruce called them the anti-living. Cyborg sighed. So the only way this apocalypse can be prevented is if I die on Apocalypse. Barbara nodded and replied, much as I hate to admit it, it's the only way. I'm sorry, Victor. There was silence. No, it's for the greater good, said Cyborg. I'm willing to sacrifice myself to save the world. Clark, Bruce, or Diana would have done the same. But if we're doing this, it only seems fair that I leave a message to the team. You got a filming camera? Barbara got out her cell phone and said, actually, I could film the message on my cell phone and transfer it onto my computer and put it on a thumb drive. Cyborg smirked and said, isn't technology great? Barbara then started filming on her cell phone. I'm assuming in a previous chapter we've explained how Cyborg, the man who is mostly machine, doesn't have any of this technology. I just love all the minutia. For the next hour, Cyborg then explained the potential dark future of what could have been. After he finished talking, Barbara stopped filming and then transferred the footage to her computer. Because of her computer skills back as Oracle, transferring cell phone footage to a computer was second nature to Barbara. Then she put the file on a computer thumb drive. All right, this footage should be playable on the back computer, stated Barbara. I'm sorry it ends to end like this, Victor. Cyborg placed his hand on Barbara's shoulder and said, nah, it's all right. This virus is something I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemies. You've been through hell already. It's going to be okay. I'm not afraid to die. Barbara looked at the time and saw it was nearly 11 a.m. In Bellevue, Washington, it was probably 8 a.m., and Kevin was most likely awake. You planning on calling Loverboy? Victor teased. Oh, stop, Barbara said, blushing, elbowing him. Why are you making jokes at a time like this? Cyborg smirked and said, better to have a sense of humor, especially when you're scared. Barbara then called Kevin on her cell phone. A minute later... Oh, I see. We've switched timelines here. Right. A minute later, Kevin picked up and said, hello? Just hearing Kevin's voice again made Barbara emotional. Hey, Kev, she said, smiling. Oh, hey, Babs, good morning, replied Kevin. It's 11 in Gotham, right? Barbara nodded and said, yeah, it is. Morning to you, too. How's your vacation? She wiped her tears. My vacation's pretty good, said Kevin. Went to the EMP in Seattle yesterday, so that was fun. How are things in Gotham? I heard there was some alien invasion that's been going on, but they haven't destroyed any cities like Bellevue or Seattle, and most of the battles were in unpopulated areas, so that means no casualties so far. Barbara chuckled. Yeah, the JLA is clearly doing a good job. Everyone misses you, though. Your father and brother, and I do too. She choked up on the last sentence. Kevin could tell she was on the verge of tears. Barbara, are you okay? Kevin asked on the phone. You almost sound like the protagonist in a Final Destination movie after they have a premonition. I just missed your jokes is all, said Kevin. Said Barbara. Kevin, you wouldn't mind if I came over to Bellevue to visit you, would you? Kevin then said, sure, I wouldn't mind. Drop by any time. Not literally, though. I wouldn't want you dropping in at 3 a.m. Barbara laughed and said, you are so funny, Kevin. Don't worry. I wouldn't do anything foolish like that. I'll tell Bruce and Damien you said hi. She smiled a little. Thanks, I appreciate that, Barbara, said Kevin. Anyway, I'm going to have me some breakfast and coffee. See you around. Barbara nodded and said, all right. Bye, Kevin. Oh, man. She did, not only was this time travel of the X-Men Days of Future Past variety, but she did, in fact, sound like the protagonist in a Final Destination movie after they have a premonition. Which also makes sense that the next chapter is called Cyborg's Final Destination, which I kind of enjoy, actually. Oh, boy. Do you know what? We gotta find out what happens to Cyborg. Chapter 11, Cyborg's Final Destination. It was the day after Barbara warned Victor of the potentially dark future. It would also be the final battle against Darkseid and the forces of Apocalypse. Cyborg chased a swarm of parademons out of Metropolis, but soon he was captured on Apocalypse, his wrists and ankles strapped to a table. DCeased was torturing him, growling. The anti-life equation, do you know of it, Metal Man? No, replied Cyborg. It's the end of all free will for the one who controls it. It is the domination of all sentient races, explained DCeased. Yeah, well, I try not to kink-shame anyone, joked Cyborg. Almighty Darkseid, growled DCeased. Almighty Darkseid. Cyborg interrupted. Why is it gods always need people to suck up to them? It's a little sad that an all-powerful being to need constant reassurance. Almighty Darkseid possesses half of the anti-life equation, continued DCeased. He believed the other half would manifest on your world. Key was, of course, correct. He found it. Cyborg knew where. He possessed the other half. It is in you. Oh, sorry, wait. It is in you, stated Darkseid, as he walked in with half the equation in a mother box. Were you, Cyborg asked, were you just waiting in the corridor to make a good entrance? Darkseid glared and said, DCeased, remove his tongue. And that's what DCeased did, causing Victor to scream in pain. Victor was scared. He knew what was going to happen. The mother box will add your half of the equation to his system, Darkseid, explained DCeased. But there is a problem. Merging the anti-life equation with the digital and physical without the host is unsound. If he is killed by the process, the equation will cease to exist. Then we need to control Victor Stone's end, said Darkseid. I will summon Death. Darkseid used the mother box to summon the Black Racer. Before the new god of death could attack, Darkseid grabbed him by the neck and said, Black Racer, I have need of you. Black Racer was then held back as DCeased took a piece of Racer's death powers, changing the anti-life equation, corrupting it. The corrupt equation latched onto Darkseid's head. He tried to tear it out as he howled in pain. My head, it's in my jaw. Black Racer laughed. It is time for God to die. DCeased realized what was unleashed and was ready to send Cyborg away. Victor thought fast and turned his left arm into a cannon blaster, which he could have done this whole time, and blasted at the mother box, instantly destroying it. You fool, DCeased hissed. What have you done? Cyborg's system grew a tongue back, and he replied, You ain't gonna get rid of me that easy. I'm making sure this disease stays on Apocalypse. Booyah, motherfucker. Why is there a motherfucker? Okay. The infected Darkseid was now a slave to the new anti-life equation. He attacked. First, he instantly killed Black Racer. Darkseid then leaped into the fires of Apocalypse into the world's core and unleashed his Omega beams onto them. This caused a massive chain reaction, causing the planet to explode, instantly destroying Apocalypse. Billions of lives were destroyed on Apocalypse, including Cyborg. As Cyborg died on planet Apocalypse, he smiled, willing to have died for the greater good, his final destination. Little did he know was that a darker timeline of undead monsters now ceased to exist. That's crazy that the first 6 or 7 or so chapters of this are in a timeline that is totally wiped out. Actually, that's not crazy at all. That's how every single timeline story goes. Man, Cyborg drops a motherfucker. I mean, it is a good way to go out. It's kind of hard to argue with that. Ah, boy. Let's see here. Chapter 12. Posthumous Message. Batman was in the Batcave, on the computer. He was tracking Cyborg's systems when he noticed that his systems suddenly ceased. Barbara, who hadn't fallen asleep since she first traveled to the past via consciousness, walked into the Batcave. Bruce, she said. Batman turned around to see Barbara and asked, Barbara, what are you doing here? You're probably wondering why Victor's systems have suddenly stopped, right? Barbara rhetorically asked. Yes, why? Batman asked. Victor's dead, replied Barbara, looking down. Batman checked for Victor's heart rate. It flatlined. He must have died on Apocalypse, deduced Batman. How did you know Victor was dead, Barbara? Barbara took out the thumb drive and said, I made a video that can explain everything you need to know. There's a part of me that wanted to editorialize this. I made a video. I filmed it on my phone, transferred it to the computer, put it on a thumb drive. Sorry. I made a video that can explain everything you need to know. But you should call the Justice League and let them know. Batman nodded and said, "It would make sense to inform the League of Victor's death." Much later, all of the Justice League members came to the Batcave to learn of Victor's death. Once everyone was there, Barbara put the thumb drive into the Batcomputer and then played the footage of Victor Stone. Victor started the video by saying, "If you're watching this, I'm already dead." In the video, Victor explained what happened when he responsible abducted to Apocalypse. How the anti-life equation was corrupted and Apocalypse was destroyed, and what would have happened if Desaad sent him back to Earth. He went into great detail about the anti-living, how 600 million people were infected, the deaths of many heroes, the destruction of Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Metropolis, the hell Barbara had to endure, including how she was forced to mercy kill an infected Kevin Beaumont and an infected Commissioner Gordo. Oh no, Gordo! This is what happens when you skip chapters. And he went into detail on how Barbara and Cisco created the time-traveling device, and how it worked. Cyborg then concluded his posthumous message by telling his teammates not to grieve, but instead be grateful to live in a world without any undead monsters. Cyborg then said, "It's been an honor and a privilege fighting with all of you, the Justice League and the Teen Titans, thanking you for making me feel human." The video then ended. Everyone was speechless, but Victor's sacrifice was meaningful to all of them. Barbara looked down in shame and said, "You all must hate me for what I've done, and for being the cause of Victor's death." Bruce took off his mask, placed his hand on Barbara's shoulder, and said, "I could never hate you, Barbara Gordon. You've been through a terrible ordeal no one should ever have to endure. You've stared into an abyss I've stared at for many years. If it had been me instead of you, I most likely would have done the same to ensure the world would be saved, regardless of the morality. All of us would." The others nodded, agreeing. "We forgive you, Barbara Gordon," said Diana. "You and Victor saved my son and his... and you and Victor saved my son and his mother," stated Bruce. "This isn't your fault, Barbara." He hugged her, and Barbara burst into tears. They were a mix of joy, sadness, and guilt. Everyone hugged Barbara to comfort her. Afterwards, Barbara said, "I want to see Kevin while I'm still awake." Flash walked in and said, "Perhaps I could be of some assistance." Flash then carried Barbara in his arms and instantly ran to Bellevue. It took 2 seconds to get from Gotham City to Bellevue, Washington, and 1 minute to get to Andrea Beaumont's house due to his unfamiliarity with where she lived. It's actually a pretty good bit. I kind of like that, actually. Once Barbara and Flash were outside of Andrea's house, Flash asked, "This the place?" Barbara nodded and said, "It is." Flash smirked and said, "Go get him, Tiger." He then ran off, leaving Barbara to see Kevin on her own. Well, there you go. I'm going to just jump ahead to the epilogue. Obviously, we've missed a couple of things in the interim, but we essentially have a Days of Future Past scenario here. Seems to have all gone swimmingly. Chapter 15, Epilogue. After coming home to Gotham, Barbara struggled to sleep. The horrors she endured in the alternate timeline of the anti-living took a toll on Barbara's mental state. She would have nightmares about the undead monsters and the horrid memories of Mercy killing the infected Kevin and her father. Sometimes she would have nightmares of turning into an undead monster herself and being killed mercilessly by Ivy, or Mercy killed by Kevin. Sometimes she would have nightmares of Martian Manhunter being infected and turning Flash into an undead monster, resulting in a disastrous chain reaction where Superman and Wonder Woman would turn, becoming powerful anti-living creatures. Some nights, Barbara would wake up screaming from the nightmares. The one person who would help her get through the nightmares was Kevin. He'd hold her and tell her it'd be okay. Kevin was her rock, her strength, and her hero. How did Barbara cope with all this personal trauma? She decided to write it all down, and that's what she did. Barbara consulted Lois Lane, and together they wrote a cautionary tale of horror, death, loss, grief, guilt, survival, and time travel. Lois gladly helped Barbara write this tale, and Barbara didn't leave a single detail out. She left out that she was Batgirl. She didn't leave a single detail out. She left out that she was Batgirl, for the sake of keeping her alter ego a secret. But she and Lois wrote and wrote. There were chapters where Barbara would write of nightmares and what would have happened if she died and turned, and the others who would have most likely turned. Due to Barbara's eidetic memory, it took her and Lois 3 weeks to write it all. Barbara and Kevin were at Lois and Clark's apartment with Lois and her son Jonathan. Barbara was writing the conclusion to her story. Her final words were, "When I was a child, my father told me that he'd protect me from any monsters. As long as he was around, there would be nothing hiding in the dark, and nothing was going to jump out of the shadows. But as I've grown, I've faced too many monsters. If I have children, I hope I can tell my children what my father told me. I hope they don't have to face the monsters I have. What I do know is that life is fleeting and death is forever. It's an inevitable truth. But I do not fear death. If I do die, I will embrace it and welcome death as an old friend." Harry Potter reference. "Knowing the monsters are far behind me now." The end. The end. Lois looked at the finishing touches and said, "This is a very good story, Barbara. Didn't realize you had such a knack for writing." Barbara smiled and said, "Well, I learned a lot reading articles from you. I learned a lot about fiction writing from reading your news pieces." Kevin came in with 4 glasses of a drink. "Hey, Mrs. Kent, I made some peach lemonade for you. John and Barbara, hope you don't mind," said Kevin. "Why is the identity of a drink a reveal?" Why does he reveal the drink? Kevin came in with 4 glasses of a drink. "Hey, Mrs. Kent, I made some peach lemonade for you, John and Barbara. I hope you don't mind," said Kevin. "Thank you, Kevin. That was very nice of you," said Lois as she took a glass. John took a glass and said, "Thanks, Kevin. Hey, Barbara, is it true you wanted to be a reporter like Mom and Dad before you became Batgirl?" Barbara nodded and said, "That is true. Thanks, babe." I see. Hang on. She was talking to John, but then she seems to now be talking to Kevin. "That is true. Thanks, babe." She happily took a glass from him and kissed him. "No problem. Finished with your story?" Kevin asked as he took a sip of his peach lemonade. "I sure am," confirmed Barbara. "I gotta say, writing all this was very therapeutic." Kevin smiled and said, "That's good. I could make you a burrito to celebrate this accomplishment." Barbara sipped her lemonade and said, "That'd be nice. I just hope this story helps me sleep better at night." Jesus Christ. What is happening? She has like PTSD, and his answer is peach lemonade and a burrito. Okay, final paragraph. Here we go. After the novel was published, Barbara lived each day like it was her last, living it to the fullest. She never took the ones she loved for granted. She never had to dread the day any undead monsters would come to end the world. She married Kevin, and they had children together, a boy and a girl. She named the boy after Victor to honor his memory. It doesn't matter about the girl. Barbara and Kevin also lived to see their 2 children grow up and have children of their own. Barbara and Kevin both lived to be 100. And eerily enough, they both died on the same day. They both died peacefully in their sleep. It was a life well lived for both of them. The end. What the fuck? They lived to 100, and then they notebooked. Oh, good Lord. Oh, my God. So, that was most of, but not all of, DCeased Borrowed Time by Billy the Blue Beaver. Now, here's the thing. Like I said earlier, I mean, this made me laugh, and some of it's just, it's just writing craft, and it's not to say that I'd write something better, because I probably wouldn't, but it is funny from an outside eye when you see, you need to, when you only have the word said, there's so many times where it says, Barbara said, like, frightenedly, or something like that, instead of screamed, yelped, quaked, whatever. That's kind of funny to me. I do love, like, the hyper specificity of certain things like, do you have a filming camera? I could use my cell phone and then transfer the file to my computer and then put that on a thumb drive. There's a hyper specificity of some of those things, but then on the flip side, just be like, and he was dead, and then you just move on. The weighting of what's in the story is really incredible. Plot wise, it's nice to have a happy ending. The actual book DCeased is interesting because, it's that classic Tom Taylor kill your darlings sort of scenario, but there are so many heartwarming moments of the heroes that do step up, that do survive. It's all about the young generation kind of being forced to take up the mantles that came before them and things like that. And, it's a grim space, but there is hope in there. This one kind of is funny in that it just like fully undoes it. And all that had to happen was Barbara had to go back in time and convince Victor to kill himself. Instead of like going back in time and knowing what would happen, have the Justice League launch an assault on Apocalypse or like do anything else. Because no, Victor, just die on Apocalypse. That's the only way. I love Batman saying, regardless of morality, I would have done whatever it took. Everyone here agrees with me, and they all go, yep. I really enjoy that. Oh, man. You know what? I don't read a lot of fan fiction, and, probably with good reason. But this was a fun one. I'm actually glad. I'm glad that I did this. I really didn't know what I was going to get into. This was fun. It's a nice exercise in creativity. Good job. Billy the Blue Beaver, well done. You wrote 12,500 words. That's amazing. That's more than most people write. You actually saw it through start to finish. I love the grim note that this whole story ends on. Just Barbara's story ends with, death is forever, it's an inevitable truth. And then her real life ends with, she lived to be 100 and then died on the same day as her husband. It was kind of amazing. Oh boy. Well, there you have it. That's if that's my dinner, I've had it. That's the Halloween special this year. That was DCeased Borrowed Time, a fan fiction by Billy the Blue Beaver. You can look that up. You can enjoy that. Read the real DCeased so you understand the timeline, a version of the timeline that got undone in this story. Boy, oh boy. Well, that's the end of Doctober. What a fun month. We're back on Wednesday with a regular episode. We're talking about Black Adam. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, adios.
Ciao, ciao. Adios.
All the superheroes, they always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure, they are men of might.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.